All right, so yeah, this is my history project. I have to interview a veteran, and I'm just going to ask you a few pages of questions. So, first, what war and what branch of service did you serve in?
I served in the Army in Vietnam.
Okay.
War.
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Made that 15 months.
Ooh, really?
Okay, I'll put that down.
Wow.
15 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where did you serve? Or Vietnam? Yeah, you said that. Mm-hmm. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted. I got greetings. Your friends and neighbors have selected you to serve in the armed forces of the United States.
Was that, did you get a letter?
Uh-huh.
And it said that?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, say that again.
I says, greetings. Your friends and neighbors have selected you to serve in the armed forces of the United States. And I wished I had kept that letter.
Yeah.
I have never heard that.
Okay. Where were you living at the time when you got drafted?
I'm living in Lynchburg.
Okay, so you're still living in Lynchburg at that time?
Yeah, living in Pearl. I was living in Pearl Street, Lynchburg, Virginia.
Okay.
Pearl Street.
Okay, let's see. Do you recall your first days in service?
My first one?
Your first days in service?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I was drafted, and I got my notice, and I went to Roanoke, Virginia. Was in, sworn in at Roanoke, and then I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, for take my basic training. And
What did it feel like?
when I went into service, I was scared. Okay, because I didn't know what was going to happen, where I was going or anything like that. But it was homesick. Of course, you get real homesick away from your parents and your wife. I was married when I went in, and I was proud because I thought, man, I had great uncles that served in all the wars. In the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. My dad was in the World War I. My dad's uncle was killed in World War I, and my dad served in World War II, and all my uncles served in World War II and Korean War, and I went into Vietnam.
Man.
And so I was really proud.
Yeah.
At that time they had a lot of people were leaving and going, leaving the United States, or guys that was eligible for draft went to Canada. And I couldn't do that because I thought that would bring shame upon my family.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do that. But I was proud because that all my relatives and family had served in the war. So I said, it's a good thing.
Yeah, that is. Man.
Are you recording this, Matthew?
Yeah.
That is so good.
It is good,
That
yeah.
is so interesting. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tell me about your boot camp training experiences.
When I first went to boot camp, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And the first thing they did for about an hour, they pulled us up to the bus. The bus went up to the center where they unloaded us.
Mm-hmm.
And they made us stand there and stand at attention and look at the sign. It says Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the airborne. And we had to sit there about an hour just looking at that sign.
Wow.
And then when of course, boot camp, you had 8 weeks of boot camp and 1 0 week, which is a total of 9 weeks. And it was really rough. I was overweight when I went in, out of shape, which everybody is, and it took me a few weeks to get to where I could get myself, where I could run as much as they wanted me to run and all that stuff. And it was enjoyable, and I got a lot of laughs, a lot of things. They did things that was. The drill sergeants had a real good time making jokes and things like that.
Yeah.
For example, they would take a guy. We're all standing in ranks, in line, and they would say things to make you laugh. And then you would be the first one. You had a smile on your face, and then he'd get over there and he'd get in your face, and he would holler and scream at you. "Oh, you're smiling. You're smiley, huh? You're laughing. Get down on the ground. Give me some push-ups." Well, then another guy would get to laughing about the guy on the ground giving the push-ups, and then he'd say, "Oh, you're laughing at the funny. So you get on the ground." You get on the ground, and he said, now put your legs and arms right straight up in the air and land on your back. You can imagine that?
Mm-hmm.
He said, now you're a cockroach. I want you to say, I'm a dying cockroach. So he would say, I'm a dying cockroach, I'm a dying cockroach, over and over again. And then somebody would get laughing at him, so they'd make you get down on the ground and
Just
put
keeps on
your
going.
hand, you put your hands and legs up in the air and say, hey, I laugh at the dying cockroach. I'm a funny. I laugh at the dying cockroach. And they keep on going there until everybody, and then they keep on adding to it. And it really got real comical,
Man.
But that was some of the things they did. And we'd go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. We'd get up about 4:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You had to shave. And the first thing you had to do once you shaved and made your bunk and all that stuff, you had to run up a hill. And they call it the top of the hill. You go up the top of the hill, and you had to do push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And the last guy that was there, they had some kind of punishment for him. So you really didn't want to be the last person up there.
Yeah.
So you had to shave real quick. Guys would come out, and their face was all cut where they shaved real quick. that type of stuff. But they made you. What they were trying to do is weed out people that they thought wouldn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people just won't fit in the army.
Yeah.
They get really discouraged, disgusted, and that type of thing. And what they want to do, if you're going in, they know you're going into combat. They want people that they know ain't not going to turn and run. That's not scared. That type of thing. And a lot of people you can. In basic training, they can weed them out.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a few guys that just didn't make it through basic training.
Yeah.
But thank you, Lord, I did.
Yeah. All right. Do you remember your instructors?
Yeah, I had a Sergeant Denny, and I had a Sergeant Holloway. And then there was a couple others, I can't remember the names.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get through it?
Well, I just thought that if everybody else could make it through it, I could too. It was hard on everybody. They did everything they could to make it hard on you, make you run and do sit-ups and push-ups and all that kind of good stuff. Made you learn your service number. For example, when you went into the mess hall, you had to give the drill sergeant your service number.
Mm-hmm.
Like mine was US 52 938 115. That was my service number. But before you could go in and eat, you had to tell him that service number.
So if you didn't know it, you couldn't go in and eat?
You had to go and read it off a piece of paper until you could come in there and tell him.
Man.
And then they had, before you could go in there, they had a bunch of little, what would you call them? PT type things. You had to, like those ladders that you have overhead ladders. You had to run the low crawl. You had to do the low crawl.
Mm-hmm.
You had to do run and jump.
Mm-hmm.
Go through that ladder. And while everybody was in line, then you had to go through that obstacle course that they had set up for you before you could even go eat. And then you had to go tell them your service number.
Man.
So that was part of the basic training.
Okay, so you said you served in Vietnam. How long were you in there?
A year, 1 year. Everybody went to Vietnam for a year.
All right. Where exactly did you go?
I went to Pleiku, and it was at Camp Airy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say that again, Blake?
Huh?
What would you say that again? Can you spell it?
Camp Airy. I don't know exactly how you spell that.
Yeah.
Airy.
And what was the place?
Pleiku.
Pleiku.
Pleku, I think it is.
Okay.
I think it's on those pictures that I put out there. Pleiku.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you remember arriving and what it was like?
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
When I was stationed at New Jersey, when I went from Fort Bragg, I went to New Jersey. That was just a holding center, for the replacements going to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that I first got orders to go to Germany. So my wife and I were real pleased without that because she could probably go with me, if I went to Germany. But prior to my leaving for Germany, the 4th Infantry Division, which was in Vietnam, just about got wiped out, they had come into heavy fire, and they said, you going to Vietnam. So anyway, I was a truck driver. I took truck driving training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and so they told me I was going to be a heavy equipment driver out of Cameron Bay, and so that's where I'm gonna go. So when I got on the plane, we went to Cameron Bay. They told me, say, you're not going to stay here in Cameron Bay, you're going to the boonies. That's what they called it. They didn't tell me 4th Infantry Division, they just said, you're going to the boonies. So anyway, we got on the plane, and I went to Pleiku, and they had an Air Force base there. Well, I spent probably the first 2 or 3 days there at that Air Force base pulling guard duty. And I had no idea where I was at or anything. It was about 5 or 6 of us, they put us in a bunker, and we had rifles and all that stuff. And at night you could hear all the shooting and stuff like that. Nothing close to us, but you could hear it off in the distance. And raining during the monsoon season, raining, wet. I can't describe to you how it felt. It was a bunker, probably about 6 foot tall. You couldn't quite stand up in it. So I'm 6'1", and I couldn't quite stand up in it because my head hit the ceiling.
Yeah.
And they had some kind of boards or something over top of the bunker. It's made out of sandbags. And when I say sandbags, it was like Virginia red dirt. Exactly the same stuff. They just put it in a bag, and they stacked bags up on top of each other and built a bunker out of it. And it would rain, and that water would come down through them bags, and you had it wet, and you'd have about that much water in the bottom of the bunker. And we stayed there for a couple of days. Nobody come out and relieve us or anything. So finally, I left, and I found one of the officers, and I told him, I said, man, we've been down here for 2 days. Ain't nobody even come here to feed us. We ain't had nothing to eat, nobody relieve us or anything. And I thought, oh man, y'all been down there that long, So they took us up and fed us, and then they said, well, y'all going to the boonies. I said, man, if this is the boonies, we're going any further out than this. I don't know what we're going to do. So then they took me to my regular camp, to the 4th Infantry Division. That's where I went from Air Force Base to the 4th Infantry Division. Stayed in that replacement center they had there for about 2 weeks. And I can't describe to you how miserable it was. We slept in tents. They had 40-man canvas tents, and Dick will show you the pictures of the tents. The first 6 months that we were over there, we slept in those tents. And we'd go to the mess hall and eat, and it was raining so much, they just dig a ditch around the tent, where we eat at, and you had this little what do you call it, mess kits that we would, you dump in water and you eat out of it. It's a little old bowl about that big around with a plate. Anyway, they fed you dehydrated potatoes and instant eggs for breakfast, and some bacon, and that's what you got. And usually the potatoes were hard. They were soft on the outside but hard on the inside. You can imagine that. And there were so many guys that would go through there and eat, and they had picnic tables, just wooden picnic tables, if you can imagine that. And so many guys would go in there and eat, and they would take their feet, and would sit down. They'd sit down on those picnic tables, and there was that much mud on the seat of those things. Finally, you just didn't bother stepping down. You just stand up and eat.
Yeah.
But like that for a couple, 2 or 3 weeks. And then one of the sergeants, my sergeant I had that was in charge of me when I was in Vietnam, his name was Hank Foley. That was his name. He come over and he said, come back there, and there was a bunch of guys in there. Now, why he picked me, I don't know. He said, he looked at me and he put his finger at me. He said, you want to come to work for me? I said, yes, sir. So I went to work for him. And the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was a truck driver, and I was in the infantry outfit, and at night you pull patrol 6 nights a week. I would go on patrol at night, call them listening points. You just go out, and you'd be anywhere from 500 600 meters from the base camp to out maybe 15, 20 miles, depending on where they wanted you to go.
Man.
And now what they did is, you can picture this. You got a base camp circle, big circle, just a big circle, and they had to put listening posts all the way out all the way around the perimeter of that whole base camp. And what it was, that give them a heads up if the enemy was coming in to attack, then they would know, because we would be there. We'd radio in and say, hey, we got some movement out here, or we see where somebody's shooting rockets or mortars into the base camp. Now what happens is when they shoot those rockets into the base camp, it would put a back blast, and the fire would shoot out the back of it, and so we would know where they were at.
Yeah.
And then we could call artillery in on them. So, but anyway, it's very interesting.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Okay. Let's see. Did you ever see combat?
Yes, I did, a few times, but I never shot anyone. I shot at people. I don't know if anybody I ever hit. Okay, I shoot in the direction of where with people shooting at you, and then you start shooting back. But they're in the woods and you're in the woods. You don't know if you hit somebody or not.
Yeah.
And I prayed to the Lord that I never hit anybody, because I didn't want to kill anybody. But if somebody was trying to kill me, then certainly I would do that. But I did, yeah. I had we'd go out on. If you look at those pictures, we'd go out in those mountain yard villages, and the NBA would come in and threaten those people, and they would have to try to cater to the NBA soldiers, and like going down buying them food, rice, and things like that. So we would the army would monitor the sale of rice down in the local village in Pleiku, and if anybody was buying too much or extra rice, they knew that it must be NBA soldiers wanting it. So then we would have to go out to that village, and they numbered the villages, like village 9, village 10, village 14 or 16 or whatever. They'd give each one of them numbers, not a name, but a number. And we would have to go out to those villages, and we'd usually get out 200 or 300 yards from the village, or sometimes a little closer than that, and we'd try to monitor it and see if there's NBA soldiers coming into that village. And when I say we, there were usually about 8 to 10 of us on patrol that night. And we would sit there and just basically all night we just listen to see if there's anybody coming in there
Man.
to get that rice.
Yeah.
And you'll see in those pictures too that there was holes in the ground in those villages. And what that was is they had a bunker built down in the ground, and those NBA soldiers would come and drop mortars on them, and they would have to get in their bunkers also. But they'd try to kill them if they didn't obey them, And so anyway, what we would do would just go out there and monitor them and see if there were any NBA soldiers coming in. And like I say, there were 6 nights there per week.
Man.
What are NBA soldiers?
North Vietnam regulars.
North Vietnam.
So you had the South Vietnamese. They had the NBA soldiers, and you had the I can't think of the name of them now. They just call it. The servicemen just call them gooks.
G-O-O, Dukes.
Gooks.
All right. Let's see. Were there many casualties in your unit?
Quite a few, yes. Yeah. I'm in the base camp. I'm located in the base camp, and the forward fire bases. That was people. They had bases. We had LPs that we went on patrols, and then they had forward fire bases in certain locations. And usually the heaviest casualties were in those forward fire bases, not in the base camp. Although there were some, and some of the guys would get shot in the base camp. They would attack us at night, usually, and then never during the day, but always at night. And usually we went for a long period of time. It looked like 2 o'clock in the morning. Every morning we'd come under attack. And what they would do is they'd shoot mortars and rockets into the camp where we were at. One time, I remember, we were we after I'd been there about 6 months, we started building buildings for us to sleep in. You know, what it was is boards about 4 foot high, and then we all the way around the building, and the building probably 40 foot by 60 foot, and then we put sandbags around the outside of it, so when them mortars and rockets would come in, the shrapnel wouldn't go through the building. Okay, but one time they had I remember, for some reason or other, I woke up, I could hear it before what happens is when they would attack, they would sound a siren. You know, somebody they had around that base camp. We had bunkers all the way around that base camp. And what they do, they took that Agent Orange and they would spray all the way around and kill all the vegetation around it. And part of my job was to maintain that perimeter, help maintain it anyway. We had a section that we had to do, and they sprayed it with Agent Orange. And then we'd go and drive metal stakes down in the ground all the way around in our section. And then we'd string barbed wire all the way around it, about 6 inches up off the ground and 12 inches, you know, in case somebody was trying to run in there, you know, they would trip over it, and it was low enough to where we thought that they couldn't crawl under it, you know. And then we set up napalm and trip flares and claymore mines all the way around it. And that way, when the enemy come in, the guys, all they had to do is squeeze a detonator to set the mines off, you know. And then the trip flares if the enemy would come in, they hit that trip flare, and then, you know, it would create a flare. You know, we'd know somebody was in. It'd alert us to it, you know. And we had bunkers, and we built bunkers like probably every, I'll say 30 to 50 yards apart, you know. We'd have bunkers, and then probably about every 100 yards we had a tower that we had built up there. We'd have 50 caliber quad 50 caliber machine gun setting up in it. And then those guys that were in those bunkers, they would be usually about 3 to 4 guys in each one of the bunkers at night. And they all had they had their rifles and ammunition and grenades and all that good stuff, you know. So it was pretty safe there, except for when they start shooting mortars and rockets into the base camp.
Yeah.
But I was going to tell you, they had the people that they wanted to keep the cleanest was the cooks. And so what they did, they built a special shower right outside of our sleeping quarters where we were sleeping at, and they had just for the cooks. They wouldn't let anybody else go in there. They just built that thing, and somehow or another, I woke up and I could hear. It seemed like I could hear the rockets coming in, you know. So I hollered. And we all got out, jumped up, and you know, there was about 40 of us sleeping in that one place. And we had built a great big bunker, 40-man bunker, you know. That was 4 sandbags wide, you know. And it probably 20 feet wide and 40 feet long, and it's 4 sandbags deep, and then we had PSP over the top of it with sandbags on top of that. That way it would almost take a direct hit. It would for a mortar, but not a rocket. But anyway, that they sent those rockets in, and that rocket hit right dead in the center of that cook shower. I mean, right in, blew it all to pieces. Well, a big piece of shrapnel come off of that, went through them sandbags, and I told you we had sandbags about 2 or 3 deep. It went all the way through those sandbags, through that building, and there was a piece of plyboard, 3/4 inch plyboard between me and the guy that was sleeping next to me. We didn't want to be right up next to each other, but they had a piece of plyboard there, 4x8 plyboard, and it cut my air mattress right in two and went straight through that piece of plyboard. If I'd been there in that bed, it would cut me in two.
Oh my.
Man.
You know, so I said, man.
Good thing you got up.
Oh yeah, it was a good thing we got out of there, you know. But it went through that plyboard. That's 3/4 inch plyboard, and that thing, it was about that long. That piece of shrapnel about that long. It was twisted, and it was sharp as a razor. I mean, it would cut you in two.
Yeah.
So
Man, that's scary. Okay. Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
well, I guess that was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine it would be.
Yeah, one of the most memorable things I think we did. We went out to a village. I think it was called Village 14. They wanted us to go out there and watch that. And in Vietnam, the mountains were. If you kind of like, if you've been down at Rustburg, you know where Long Mountain is. It's a high mountain. It's just a regular mountain. But right at the top of those mountains are kind of flat.
Yeah.
And a lot of those were like that in Vietnam. So anyway, they told us they wanted us to go out there and do the same thing. We wanted to watch and see if there was any enemy activity going into that village. So we went out there, and there was probably about 10 of us out there. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, we were up on the plateau. The village was on the plateau, and we were up there watching them. Well, down on the side of that thing, you could hear screaming and hollering. There was another village down there. It was south. There was a difference between the mountain yard people, which is in those pictures. They remind you of American Indians. That's the way they lived. They had their villages, and they built their houses, real nice, clean-looking houses. Real decent people, you know, I thought. And they were mountain yard people and South Vietnamese people. And the South Vietnamese people had a village down at the bottom of that mountain. And the NVA soldiers had come in there, and they were slaughtering people in that. And it was, like I say, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we heard the hollering and screaming and everything going on. And so we radioed back into the base camp, you know, trying to find out what was going on. And they said, well, they'll get back with us in a few minutes. Well, it wasn't but about 15 minutes they called us back and said that there was an estimated regiment of NVA soldiers down there in that village. And the South Vietnamese soldiers were attacking them, okay? And they were headed in our direction. Said, you guys get ready, so because they're coming in your direction. And we're gonna send out some choppers, you know, to help you. So anyway, what they did, they send out choppers, and then helicopters, like we call them choppers, but they're helicopters. Helicopters had those miniguns out there. They shoot 6,000 rounds a minute, and they would spray the whole side of that mountain, you know, with those miniguns. One of them would go, and then another one would go, and you could hear people hollering and screaming. And then they had those C-130s. That was a regular airplane. I don't know if you know what a C-130 looks like or not. But anyway, out the back of that, they were shooting a grenade as a grenade launcher. And you could hear it go boom, 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 like that. That's just that quick. It was shooting a grenade that quick all along the side of that mountain. And then, like I say, you could hear people hollering and screaming. And they go boom, 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 boom. Then you hear the explosion along it.
Yeah.
But they did that for I bet you a couple hours.
Really?
And but anyway, they told us, you know, they were heading our direction. She said, you guys get ready. We were all scared to death. I mean, you know, there ain't 10 of you out there, and you got an estimated regiment of people coming your direction. So we were scared to death, but we had to stay out there all night. And thank goodness they never made it to where we were at. So,
Yeah.
but that was a very memorable occasion. I remember that very well.
Yeah, really. Okay. Were you ever a prisoner of war?
No. No. If you noticed in Vietnam War, American soldiers, you know, when the POWs came back from Vietnam, there was no American soldiers. Only one, that one in Lynchburg. What was his name? Dick, you know the guy. I'm sure you've heard his name. He was the only one I know of that was a POW, was in the Army. And what they did is they just didn't take military or soldiers as POWs. They capture them and kill them and torture them. And I've heard stories after stories about how they would torture them and hang them up in the trees, cut their tongue out, cut their private parts off, and stick them in their mouths and all that kind of stuff.
Man.
So you just knew that you wasn't going to be no POW.
Mm-hmm.
And American soldiers would do the same thing. They not quite as bad, but they did some things. One occasion I remember, these two guys came in from a forward fire base, and they had bragging about what they had done to this North Vietnamese soldier that they had captured, and they cut his head off. They killed him and cut his head off. And two of them, one of them, they showed me a picture of it. One of them was on his left side and one on his right. They were holding him up, and the other one was holding his head in his right hand. I thought, how in the world can be that cruel to people? But see, he had seen things that they had done to the American soldiers, and so they just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And I always thought that people coming back from war, the reason they have such nightmares and problems is because of things they've done in the war. They didn't treat them with respect. One thing to kill somebody, but some to do stuff like that was just
Something else, yeah.
But they done the same thing to American soldiers, and sometimes worse.
Yeah. Man. Were you ever awarded any medals or citations?
I did, yeah. I got the Army Accommodation Medal. I got the Vietnam Citation Service Medal, National Defense Medal. I got medal for sharpshooter and expert, sharpshooter with M14 and expert with M16.
Right, did you sustain any injuries?
I did. I got shrapnel in my chest right here. We were out on the perimeter of the base camp. Like I told you, we were responsible for keeping it clean and keeping it up and all that kind of stuff. And setting up all this bombs and trip flares and things like that. The concertina wire, we had to string that on it. But anyway, we were burning brush that had grown up there, and somebody had throw a whole handful of ammunition over into the brush pile. If we set that thing on fire, what we'd do is pull diesel fuel on it and light it with a match and burn it. Well, that stuff went off. Well, some of the ammunition was going off, and one of it hit me right here in my chest, right there. That's it. My heart, right there. My heart's right underneath there, and it went in about that deep. And so we had to go to the fourth medical center, and they went in there and did an operation on me, cut that out, and sewed me back up. And one time I ran over a landmine with my truck, and that's another memorable occasion. Part of my job, our job was we would go out to the base camps and to the villages and pick up sandbags. You remember I tell you about all these sandbags? We used numerous sandbags. We didn't have time to fill them up. So what they did is they paid those mountain yard kids a penny a piece for filling up those sandbags, which is a lot of money to them.
Yeah.
But anyway, then we'd have to go out every day, load them on the trucks and bring them back and build bunkers with them, or repair bunkers. And we went out to the village. When we go out to the villages and pick up those sandbags, where you had 2 or 3 guys that were loading them and 2 or 3 guys that was watching, that was standing guard, because we didn't know if somebody would attack us or didn't attack us. So we just had to. That's the way we had to operate. And you carried your weapon with you 24/7. Always, wherever you went, you had to have your rifle with you, or pretty daggone close to you all the time. And so anyway, we were going out there, and I was young, and we had that deuce and a half loaded down with sandbags, and it was probably 4 foot deep on top of it, maybe a little deeper. Now all we could get on it, and there was about 4 guys on top of the sandbags, that was riding in the back, and then I was in the front driving, and another guy was the guard. He was riding the first shot. He was riding shotgun with me. So anyway, we were going back, and we're going up going up a hill, and as we're going up that hill, I noticed when I'd give it a little gas, you pump the gas a little bit, that the truck front wheels would come up off the ground. And I was playing with it, just because I had them guys on the back anyway, and I would hit the gas on it to make the wheels come up off of it. So went over the top of the crest of the hill. Just when I went right up to the top of the hill, I give it a little bit of gas, and that front wheels come up, and it went over the crest of the hill, and the front wheels missed the mine. There was a landmine in the road. They had set when they watched us when we went out. They set that mine, and anyway, my front wheels missed it, and the back wheels hit it. It blew the back wheels off of that truck, and if my front wheels had hit the truck, I mean, it hit that mine, it would have killed us, because there's nothing in that floorboard except a little bit of metal, and it blew the wheels off of the back of the truck, and had not been for them sandbags on the top of it, then we probably killed maybe some of us in the front and those guys in the back for sure. And then when we went over that, and it blew the wheels off of it, then you're trained to try to drive that truck as far as it'll go, or you don't never want to stop right where they want you to stop at, because they usually have you zeroed in. And so it blew the two wheels on the back of it, but the other, them multi-fuel trucks, all the wheels are pulled and they don't stop. And so I drove it down about 50 yards as far as I could get it to go. And so as soon as we got out of the truck, getting out, you could see the metal and tire fragments coming down, because it shot them way. That's how far it shot it up in the air. And then these snipers were shooting at us. So then of course we had to call helicopters in and that's where I was telling you about. I could shoot in the direction of where they were firing from, but I don't know if I hit anybody.
Yeah, you couldn't tell.
So then they called the helicopters in to help us, And so as soon as they seen those choppers coming in, they quit shooting.
Man. Okay, how did you stay in touch with your family?
Letters and tapes. My wife would send me a tape, and they'd sing me a song. My sister and my wife and one of my friends, they would sing songs or talk to me on tapes and send it to me. And I had a little tape, and I sent it back to her. We did that, but mostly letters. And usually my wife would write me 2 letters a day. One in the morning, one in the evening, and I'd write her every day. And sometimes you go 6-7 days you didn't get no letter, and then you get so depressed. I can't tell you how depressed you get because you didn't get a letter. And I'd write her a letter. I said, "Honey, I haven't got a letter with you. What's going on?" She's, "Well, honey, I'm writing you every day." And what happens is the mail would just get hung up somewhere or another, and then finally I'd get a big old stack of letters. And when you got mail calling, you got letters in, they leave you alone. And then everybody would sit down wherever you were at, you could read your letters, and that was just a highlight of your day, getting your letters.
Yeah.
Some of the guys, I remember Melvin Hill from down in Galax, Virginia, I think it's where, Hillsville, Virginia. That's where he's, Melvin Hill from Hillsville, Virginia. And his wife sent him a Dear John letter. And he would cry, and then he'd try to he'd go and see if he could go home, and they wouldn't let him go home or anything like that, and he was so depressed. I can't tell you how depressed all the other guys got because of that, One letter to that one guy depressed 40 other people. I mean, they was really, really depressed, over that letter, a Dear John letter. She just said she was going to divorce him. She'd found somebody else. But everybody got depressed over that.
Yeah, man. Was there something special you did for good luck?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't do anything with good luck. I just knew the Lord had his hands on me. I know we would go out and like I told you, when we would go out on those LPs, and we'd go out like anywhere from 50 or 500 yards to 20 miles, depending on where they wanted us to go. And I remember on a couple occasions where they would send us out to this one village. It was the NVA soldiers they thought was coming in there. And we were only about 500 yards from the base camp. And that meant when you were only about 500 yards from the base camp, when the enemy would attack the base camp, they start putting rockets in on the base camp and then mortars. And then they start shooting. See, when you can imagine when everybody starts shooting outwards at the same time, you know, they don't wait for till they see them. They just start shooting.
Yeah.
And anyway, they had a quad 50 machine gun. That's 4 50 caliber machine guns mounted on a tripod. And they had a 5 horsepower Briggs and Stratton engine feeding the ammunition into those things. And they would shoot those things. And every 5th round was a tracer. And we were out there, and the enemy fire mortars were falling short of the base camp. They were landing on us, you know, right where we were at. You could hear the mortars going, you know, the mortars coming in, hitting the ground, and then the shrapnel going through the trees. You know, you could hear it. And then those quad 50 machine guns, they started shooting, and they were hitting right where we were at. And man, I just thought for sure, you know, I'm going to die. You know, because every 5th round was a tracer. You could see them coming at you. You know, I thought, Lord, it's just a matter of time you're going to get hit. But, you know, we'd call them we're ready on back into the base camp, tell them to get their fire down, you know, lower it down because they were burning us up. And I remember praying. I said, Lord, if you get me out of this, when I get home, I'll serve you all the days of my life. And that's what I told. You know, I prayed that prayer, and I know the Lord had His hand on me, just sure that He did. And I'll tell you the rest of the story. Then when I got home, I'd been home a couple of years, and some preachers would come by my house occasionally, and I didn't go to church, and I didn't serve the Lord, and I drank a little bit, smoked and drank. And preachers would come by the house, but I just didn't want to have anything to do with them, you know. And I was out there on a Saturday afternoon, it was about 4 o'clock in the evening, and I was working on my car. I was putting brake lights on the car. My hands was all greasy and everything. The preacher pulled up in my driveway, and he introduced himself to me, you know, and he said, you mind if I come in and talk to you and your wife for a few minutes? I said, no, come on in the house. So he came in the house, and he was talking about the church, you know. He said how the Lord's been moving. It was Temple Baptist Church. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or
Madison
not.
Heights.
Anyway, they very first started the church. And he said the Lord has been moving in that area of church, you know, and people getting saved and all that stuff, you know. And he didn't try to force anything on me or anything like that. But he was talking to my wife and everything. And then he told my wife, he said, turn that TV off right there. So, you know, he turned the television off. He talked a little bit more. And he didn't say anything else, but he just looked at me and he said, Keith, do you know the Lord loves you? And that's all he had to say. Man, and I knew right then, I said, I know the promise I made to the Lord. I said, Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll serve you all the days of my life. And so I knelt down that day and I gave my heart to the Lord. And I've been serving Him ever since.
Man.
And,
Makes you cry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's great.
But-
How it works.
but now I was 23 years old, and now I'm doing my best to serve Him all the days of my life because God was good to me.
Yeah, he is. He's good.
Yeah.
Man. Let's see. Ooh, what were some of the pranks that you or others would pull?
So Lord, they used to in base camp and basic training, they like to pick on somebody. You know, they get one guy that, especially I remember they had one guy that was a platoon leader, you know, and he was kind of buddies with the drill sergeants, you know, kind of standoffish with the guys. Is what they would do is they'd do some things like short shooting. You know, what they would do is they take his bed, and you know normally you got sheets goes from the top to the bottom. And what they do is take the bottom sheet portion of the sheet, pull it all the way up to the top, tuck it in, and then that way when he got into bed, he'd only go down about 4 foot. They call it short shooting. Then the other thing they would do is they'd catch a guy, he would be sleeping, and he would be like this, sleeping with, maybe have his hands out like this or whatever, and they'd take shaving lotion, shaving cream, you know, with a big white shaving cream,
Yeah,
they'd take it and
yeah.
spray his hand plumb full of that stuff, you know, to give a big old ball of
Yeah.
shaving cream on his hand. Then they'd take a little something and tickle his nose.
He comes up
And
in.
it comes up in his face. This stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, and then do you have any photographs?
I got bunches there.
There's that whole pile of them up there.
Oh, okay. We can look at those later then. Okay. Let's see. Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes, I do. I even got a picture of that, Julia. Somewhere or another. I don't know if it's out there or not. But anyway, I got the day before I ended, my service ended, I was on patrol. You know, and I was about 15 miles out from the base camp. I was scared to death. You know, when you first went into service, you know, it might be a chance that you might get killed or something, you know, because you got a year to go. But when you're in your last day, last week, and you still got to go on patrol, I've seen guys just break down and cry. I mean, just cry because they didn't want to go out. You know, you think, you know, been all this time and go out to the last day or the day before I'm going home and I got to go on patrol. And that's really depressing to me. I didn't cry, but I was really depressed. But I got out of there and I was happy when I got on the plane and went to Cameron Bay. Replacement center down there, they call it, and they said, you're on your way home. And I'll tell you another little story. When I was in Cameron Bay, going home, and when we got down there, some reason or another, the barracks, they put everybody that's going on the plane. In other words, this plane's leaving in the morning at 4:30 or 5 o'clock or whatever time that plane's leaving. They put everybody in the same building. You know, like it might be however many would fit in there, or maybe 2 buildings. But anyway, there was 3 of us. There wasn't enough room in that building for us to go in, the barracks. So they said, well, okay, you guys stay in this barracks over here, and we will have an orderly come over in the morning. Your plane leaves at like 5 o'clock that morning. We'll have them come over and wake you up in time so you can go over to the airport and get on the plane. So I said, well, okay. Well, we did that. Well, I woke up about 5:30, and the plane left at like 5 o'clock. Nobody woke us up. So I went, and there was an officer there, and I went and told him, I said, look, somebody's supposed to wake us up. And he come cussing. You dummy, you know, told us how dumb we were and stupid and all this stuff. You're supposed to have been on that plane. You done missed that plane. And now you're going to have to wait a week, he told us, before you can get on another plane, scheduled on another plane. I thought, man, I'm supposed to be going home, you know. I'm going home, so I'm going to see my wife and family, you know. So anyway, I went up and seen the what they call the IG general, the adjutant general. I went up and seen him. And I told him what happened, you know. So he called that officer in, and he come in blessing him out. I mean, you know, that somebody was supposed to work these boys up. Now, you get them on the next plane out of here. You understand me, blah, 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 blah. Never heard such cussing in all my life. But anyway, long story short, he got us on the plane and went home. And I had after I got home, I went immediately to the employment office and applied for a job, you know, because I had to go to work. And so they got me an interview, go down to Lynchburg Foundry. They said, you just go down there and work down at Lynchburg Foundry until you get, you know, you get another job, or you stay there if you want to. And so anyway, first day on the job, I went down there and I got a phone call, and my wife had said that somebody had called from the service, and they called call, I can't remember if they called her or come see her. I can't remember. They come and my mother-in-law answered the phone, and they told her that wanted to know if my wife was there. They said, yeah, because you know that I was missing in action. You know. And she said, no, he's not, he's here. She said, are you sure? He said, are you sure he's here? She said, yeah, he's here. He said, he went down to the foundry, went to work. So they called me at the foundry and wanted to know who, you know, they said, we just need to talk to you, you know. Said, what's your service number? Because that way they could know, you know, US 52-938-115, they know exactly who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I told them, they said, yeah. I said, well, what happened is that plane, I understand that plane that I was scheduled to be on crashed.
What?
Yeah, that
Really?
plane had crashed. See, that shows you how the Lord works, you know.
Man.
The plane that I was scheduled to be on crashed. And see, they had me listed as a passenger on that plane. And
Man.
so I had called the next plane. And see how the Lord works?
That really does show you how the Lord works.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But you know, the Lord had His hand on me, you know,
Yeah.
and so I know that He was watching out for me.
Man.
That's almost too good to be true, almost.
Well, and then that Christmas, Darrell Blackburn, he was one of the guys I served with in the Army over there. Evidently, he had gotten word that I was on that plane too, so he sent me my wife a Christmas card and told her how sorry he was that we had served together and all. He was sorry that I had gotten killed. So,
Man. Shoot. Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
yes,
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So what was your, I mean, what?
When I got, let me tell you, when I got out, I was young and stupid and foolish, and I quit school. I quit in the 9th grade of school. I got my GED when I was in the Army. I took a test and passed the GED test. That's how I got my school. And then, of course, after I got out of the Army, I went to the community college and took classes at the community college and took programming classes and stuff like that. But I was very stupid when I was young.
But you, from the GI Bill, you went to community college.
Yeah, I
That's
did.
good.
Yeah,
And you finished the 2 years thing.
I didn't even finish that. I didn't have time to finish that because the way we were working 12 hours a day, 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I didn't have time to finish that.
Mhm.
But I did take quite a few classes over there, as many as I could, and
Mhm.
took computer programming classes. But then again, say the Lord has blessed me in that respect. You know, I was learning. I was able to be a computer programmer, or learn how to program computers, and I didn't have a whole lot of education. And my fault. But God blessed me anyway. One thing I learned, Matt, was, you know, in the Bible, the Bible tells you about, you know, I think it's in Isaiah, it talks about 2 different types of things. One of them is an inheritance that a child gets from his parents. You know, the firstborn always got the double portion.
Yeah.
Okay. But the other was the blessings, you know, that when inheritance, and one of them was the blessings. And when I found out, when you serve the Lord, you know, God will, the inheritance is okay. You know, that's the money, the things you get, that's okay. But the best thing to get is the blessings of the Lord upon your life. When you serve the Lord, you get His blessings upon your life, and things will go good for you.
They will.
They will go good for you.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
He'll bless you in all that you do. You know, that thing, scripture that David says, you know, as I was young and now I'm old, and I've not seen the God's children begging bread or hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Did you make any close friends while in service?
Yeah, quite a few of them, yeah. Some of them here in Lynchburg. So, some of them have been a long time. I had a Jerry Clark, and Melvin Smith, Melvin Hill, my buddy Biaggi. He was my buddy. He was worked on a tugboat in New York Harbor. You know, those when they bring ships in the harbor. And he was one. His dad was a captain on a tugboat, and he was a hand on that tugboat. That's what he was going to do when he get out. He was going to be a tugboat hand. But he was my good buddy, and I had a guy named Roger Yenny from New Jersey. He was a good friend.
Let's see, did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I expect so, yeah.
Yeah.
Had a big influence on me, yeah. Maybe changed my mind about a whole lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
especially about the Lord.
Definitely, yeah. Let's see. Did you join any veterans organizations?
No. I did. I did join the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not a member of that right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Just what I explained to you.
Mm-hmm.
Just, had a big impact. I wouldn't, if I had went into service, I wouldn't have got my GED, and I don't know that I would have known the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But through the fact that I'd gone into the service, I did get my education, and I did know the Lord because of that.
You never know what he's going to do in your life.
You don't know.
Mm-mm.
You think you're going to, if you think life is going to go one way with you, and it'll go something completely different.
Mhm.
And it happens. The people think it's chance, but it's not.
Mhm.
If God's in control of your life, He's in control of your life, even good times and bad times. It's not going to be that you're not always going to have, things are not always going to be good all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But if God's on your side, that's the best you can get. He's not going to leave you, forsake you, and leave you. He said, "I'll be with you even unto the end of the world."
Yep.
And that to be true.
See, is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not covered in the interview?
No, just I hope you make a good grade and you're not disappointed.
We're gonna add that.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to add.
You're going to make a good grade.
All right. Well, that's all the questions.
That was excellent.
That was. Thank you.